path in particular, something that's really important is having clarity, the clarity of where we want to go, the direction we want to go. Once we have this clarity, unfortunately, it's not always stable, in the sense that when we're able to reflect through with the teachings, or have moments of clarity of where we want to go, you say, yes, this is the direction I want to go. I want to get out of samsara. I want to reach a deep state of peace. We we put our energy in that direction. It seems like everything is done, and then after a while we forget. And this is why that along the path, once we have found the path, there are two characteristics that we need to cultivate. They're called Drempa and Sheshing in Tibetan. Drempa, you can translate it as mindful recollection, and or like awareness and memory. So it's having the memory of where we want to go, what we want to do, where we're going, and repeat that to ourselves again and again. Because it's possible that as we're walking at a certain point, we see something else and we forget. When when I do this, give this example, I always think of our dear friend Pete, monk Pete, who left his body a few years ago. Every time that he would come here by car, so the time would always have different durations. It would last a different amount of times, because as he was on the trip, at a certain point, if he would see, for example, the name of a city, a city of a name that he liked, he would just get off the highway, and he would get off the highway, and he never liked to do the same road. Once from Milan to Albagnano, it took him 6 years. Anyway, that was a little bit his way. But what can happen is that we're going in a certain direction, and we see something really beautiful, or we see something really scary that frightens us, and then we're distracted, and we're taken by that beautiful thing that we're attracted to, or that's that scary thing that for which we have aversion, and we end up somewhere else. So that's why it's always important to remember why we're here, what we want, what's at the basis of our motivation, the why. And together with this, what's important is also to have the awareness of what I'm doing, our ability to watch ourselves, self-observation, to see our physical actions, our interactions, our choices, to observe our speech, and also to the point of being able to watch our own thoughts and all the emotions and motivations that are behind those thoughts, at the basis of those thoughts, because what gives the most direction to what we do is the motivation that's behind it. So to have awareness, being able to see what I do, what I say, what I think, how I see all of this. I mean, one needs to also train in this, but it's extremely important along our path. It's as if we're on a road. Yes, I need to remember where I'm going, but I also need to have awareness of I need to know where I am, and I need to have awareness of where I'm going. I think it's happened to many of us. Once you're so used to taking a certain road with the car, and then at a certain point you need to go somewhere else, but then you end up taking the road that you take every day, and this is the lack of awareness, lack of mindful recollection, because you know you need to go somewhere else, but you're so used to taking that same road that you weren't aware at that time you needed to turn. So that awareness of what we're doing, etc., is really important. But keep always clear the the in our mind the direction where we want to go. And something that is connected to what we said last week, it's an example that Papanka Rinpoche called Churchik. I've never found the right translation, but the metaphor that Papanka Rinpoche used was that if you put a lot of butter on top of a leather container and you leave that butter for a long time, at the beginning the leather absorbs the fat of the butter, but after a while, what happens is that the leather doesn't absorb the grease, the fat anymore. It becomes becomes like waterproof, and it doesn't. No matter how much butter you put on, it doesn't absorb anymore. And it's similar to that. It can happen that we're so used, we're um, in constant contact with the practice, with the masters. Um, that at a certain point they just don't have any effect on us because we take for granted, and we don't allow ourselves to be permeated. Let's say the opposite example that Papanka Rinpoche would give where he would say, we should, with the teachings, with the presence of our teachers, of the holy places and the practices and the prayers, we should be like, for example, if we have an object of anger, a person who has a certain behavior, for example, that makes us get very angry, no matter how much we know about like how used to we are about the used to that as no matter how much we know about that kind of behavior from that person, um, if someone comes to us and starts talking to us about that person and that person's behavior, we're not indifferent, we get upset. And this also can happen also for an object of desire. The more someone talks about that object, or then the desire grows, or an object of sadness. So similar to this, when we recite the refuge prayer, or we do the four immeasurables, etc., seven, we should allow these words to reach us, to permeate us, and let it not be just a formality, because because it's part of a so-called ceremony. In the monasteries where I was, in the monastery where I was in India, um, there's a way to say, like, with how when you do something automatically without giving a lot of effort in it, like for example, if you needed to clean a room and you just cleaned it really quickly, you didn't clean the corners, it was said, oh, that work, you did that work for the benefit of all sentient beings. Why? Because we're so used to um, reciting the prayer, and it's not a prayer. I mean, these are words. How can I say? Munlam. The words that direct our aspirations. They're words of aspiration to direct our own mind. They're motivational words, if you want to call them like that. It's not a request or something. So when we say in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment with the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. It's such an important verse that it's recited at the beginning of every practice. So one could become so used to it that one recites it without really thinking about the meaning, without feeling it. So with a kind of irony, um, like kind of joking, a kind of self-criticism too. S- um, so like if something is done automatically without thinking too much about it, speaking Tibetan, dro, dro la penche sangue dro parasho. Oh, you did that work for the benefit of all sentient beings, but we need to be very careful to not to be very careful to make sure that this doesn't happen with our own spiritual path. This happens when it becomes a habit to recite mantras, being in a certain place, a certain context, certain practices, and we grasp at the form, the external form, and we don't allow that tool to 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 touch our heart and our feelings and our deeply our deepest state of being. We need to be very careful that this doesn't happen. And this is why we always need this mindful recollection and in the awareness of, of what's happening, vigilance. Another important aspect. And we have days of all kinds. There are times in our lives where we have a lot of clarity, and there are times where we don't have that much clarity. Using a metaphor, there are sunny days and there are there are stormy days. This is something that just happens normally. I see this. There are times where seeing people around me. There are times when there's great clarity. It seems like, oh, finally people are understanding well. There's this feeling of joy, of awareness, of, where's there's faith, there's clarity, of the road, of the path to take. And there are times where there's the storm of jealousy and fear and sadness, etc., etc. And that path, one doesn't see it anymore. This morning, I went walking in the woods, and behind the house, there's there's an enormous quantity of fallen trees after the storm of a few months ago. And I thought about something. When there's a storm, let's use this as a metaphor. We don't have the ability at that moment to halt the storm, to stop the storm. We can't stop it. Like when there's a storm, what should one do? One should wait for it to pass. But one should find a safe place. If we were a tree in the middle of the storm, we should put all of our effort into our roots, give flexibility to our upper limbs, and just wait for the storm to pass. So what are our own storms? They come through astrological causes, social causes, really um, interpersonal relationships, hormonal storms. There are these dark days or foggy days, stormy days where one doesn't understand anything, or days of strong wind, or even days with thunder. But what's important is that even if one is in the middle of the storm, you know, everything one does during the storm, one lives the consequences. It's not that what you do, it, we're always responsible for our actions, and we always live the results of our actions. So if during the storm I'm not able to manage well, and the tree falls, it stays down. For this reason, we need to protect ourselves, having a strong reference point that when we see that there's a storm, and I promise you there will be storms for one reason or another, in one context or another. We need to have deep roots. We need to be able to connect well, to to not allow ourselves to fall, to lose our direction. Using another metaphor, it's like a boat that when there's a storm, one needs to put the anchor very, very, very deep and strong, because otherwise during the storm the boat is going to be taken in a completely different place. But when there are moments of sun, we need to reinforce our roots. Reinforce reinforce our roots means to reinforce our motivation, understand why we're here, what do we want to do, reinforce the faith in our path, the connection with our gurus, our own practice, our Dharma practice. Look at our motivation, really reinforce all of that. When things are fine, when we have sunny days, and we do this with practice, with the recitation, with the practices, recitation, meditation. So, and then when we see during stormy times, we shouldn't try to fight against the storm. We just remind ourselves that there is a storm, see that there's a storm, and remind ourselves that it's going to pass, putting our effort into our roots, and little by little the storm passes. This is very, very important for me, because it's the same reason for which the vows exist. One of the best metaphors that we can use for the vows is to think of a road. And let's imagine that we need to go along a road on a sunny day. It's really easy to, maybe we're driving, it's very easy to follow the road when it's a sunny day. But what happens if that road is very curvy, and then I find myself in the dark with a lot of fog, and this road doesn't have the white lines, and then it's really hard to follow the road. It's very easy to run off the road. So, you know, at night, when there's fog, those white lines are indispensable. I mean, I don't know if it's ever happened to you to to be driving at night. You know, i- if it's ever happened to you that you've been driving at night in the fog on a road where there aren't these lines, this is very, very, very difficult. On the contrary, when you do have them, I mean, they're a saving grace. You need them. So, but when it's a sunny day, where are those lines, or there aren't, we stay on the road. But instead, when it's dark or foggy, we really need these lines. But those lines need to be la- painted. They need to be reinforced on sunny days. At the same time, when we have days of sun, of inner clarity, we're following a virtuous direction. We don't need to take vows. We don't need to have specific commitments, because we have clarity, a clarity of the direction to follow. and clarity of our behavior and what we should do. But there are times when we're in the middle of the dark and the fog, and we don't have all that. We don't have all that clarity. What I should cultivate, what I should abandon. There are times where one can get lost, and those are the times where those white lines are fundamental. Those are the commitments that we take on the sunny days when things are going fine. So for ourselves, having when we're when things are going well, it's very important to take commitments about what I want to cultivate and what I want to abandon regarding our physical behavior, our verbal conduct, and also mental. This is this is the so-called morality, the taking of vows. And if we see how to practice the Dharma, there's a part that has to do with knowledge and study, the understanding, the world view that gradually is transformed, and then there's a part that has to do with conduct, and that's where we find our vows, is where one takes a commitment to do certain things and to avoid doing certain other things, and then there's the part of meditation, etc. But the part of vows is very important, and vows have a special power when we take a commitment. It's said that a commitment that's taken correctly generates something physical inside of us. Nampar, it's a form that cannot be cannot be perceived through our five senses. It's matter that cannot be touched or seen. And I don't know how your own experience is, but what I've seen for myself is that when I have a commitment with a situation or a person, there's a specific commitment. As long as that commitment is maintained, there's a strength that helps me maintain that commitment. But once it finishes, or it is broken from my side or on another person's side, then it becomes very, very difficult to sustain, to maintain. It's the same. It's like if you have the commitment to do something every day, that one day you don't do it, 3 months will go by before you redo that thing again, because once you break a commitment, you can't just you need to regenerate that commitment. It's not like I have it's not like I have a commitment. I have a Like I said, I've created something that at a certain point breaks, and so then I need to recreate it another time. It's not that it just waits there if it's broken. It's something that's difficult to put in words, but when there's a strong, strong commitment, there's something physical that remains. It's something very precious. It's something that protects us. You can see this in the commitments between people in all situations. So this commitment that we take, one definition that is given is a semsung. It's the actual protection of our own mind. Why do I need to protect my mind with a commitment? Because there are stormy days, there are dark days, there are days where things are not clear. There are days with it's the storm, and on that day, more vulnerable. I'm more vulnerable to doing things that I know I shouldn't do. So I need to protect myself with the commitments that I take. There's also there's a delicate aspect um, regarding commitments, because when we take a vow, when we take a commitment, it's something extremely important for ourselves. Unfortunately, in our modern times, but let's say from since a long time, what's happening more and more, so we give um, less and less value to the commitments we take. It seems that taking a vow, taking a vow is a formality instead of a direction that we're giving to ourselves. For this, one one of my teachers, Geshe Thupten Rinchen, when he would talk about vows, monastic vows or other vows like bodhisattva vows or tantric vows, etc., etc., he he would kind of make fun, but also very seriously, he would say, don't, for the vows, take, taking vows, he would say, don't make it a nomad's tent on a rainy day, which a nomad's tent on a rainy day. Let's say that there are holes. There are holes for the water. The water comes in, and so when these drops of water make top 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 means it is actually taking a vow. So what he means is I've it's like taking lots of commitments, even though you don't know, what it means and how you'll manage, So Rinpoche put a lot of emphasis. He would say it doesn't matter how many vows that we take, but it's important. It's important to take the commitments that we can maintain. Make them a guide for ourselves. Um, it's not about being part of a system. Instead, we use these commitments as guidelines for our daily life. So I remind all of you the importance of taking commitments, and it's not up to me to tell you which commitments you should take. And since the time of Buddha, when he transmitted the vows of the various vows, he gave two different systems according to the context. So, for a determined amount of time, or indeterminate amount of time. Atisha, for example, when he arrived in Tibet in the 11th century, he himself he came from a monastic tradition um, where the vows were given for just a certain amount of time. So one would take the vows for 3 years or for 1 year for a just specific period of time. And at the end of that time, you could renew those vows or not. And then you could renew them and take them again. But when he got to Tibet, the king who was there in Tibet said, please, can you please, can you please transmit the vows, but make them for indeterminate amount of time, because the Tibetans are too wild, and if the vows were only for a certain amount of time, then it would just be a party, you know, people. People would take the vows for 10 months, and then after 10 months they would party, and then a little bit like, in Brazil, I would joke around and say, okay, I take vows except not during carnival time. But that's not the point. So they invited another master from India who had this lineage. Um, they had a lineage for vows taken for forever. So um, Atisha had these vows of the pratimoksha vows of personal liberation. They were taken for just a certain amount of time that were renewed. So it's important for us to take the vows. If I take a vow for 1 month and I do everything I need to do to maintain it, and at the end of the month, I see if I'm going to renew it or not, and I go I go on like this and I can take a vow for 6 months or for 1 year, but for not much more, because what happens in the times in which we live, if we take commitments that for too long of a period, or that are too difficult, at a certain point we just drop them, or we don't remember why we've taken them, or if we've even had them. So it's important. It's important to take them for just a specific amount of time, because maybe it's difficult, but we say, okay, I just need 2 more days, and then you do. This protects us from our moments of difficulty, our moments of weakness. But where should we begin? We should first have the ability to have this mindful recollection and this vigilance on our, our external behavior. If we don't have the ability to direct our way of interacting with the world physically, externally, with our physical conduct, then it's very difficult to do this on a deeper level, on a mental level. So on this first level has to do with is external. And I leave this to each one of you to see, which what are my behaviors, in my ways of dealing with other people, in my ways of relating to nature. Today, even simply, even just buying, being an aware consumer, can be a big change. So generate commitments um, um, related to our external behavior, just to begin, and then we can then generate, we can take commitments that are related to our communication, like which has to do with spoken and written word. So I take the commitment to speak peacefully, not violently, to maintain the coherence of my speech, to not speak when I'm taken by negative emotions. It's, so I take commitments related to my way of communicating. I don't think we should take the vow to not speak, but surely the vow to not say what's not necessary helps a lot, and to not speak when we're taken by impulsive feelings. And Rinpoche would often say that words can do more damage than weapons. We need to be very careful when we speak. We should not speak impulsively, taken by our emotions. And remember that when we're speaking, we want the other person to understand something, not because we need to say something. So another level of commitment is our speech, and once we're able to maintain our commitments of body and speech well, then we get to the next level that have to do with commitments of the mind, and here we go gradually to deeper commitments, even getting to, never, the vow to never give up love for beings, never forget the emptiness of all phenomenon. It's important to start directing our mind. So this type of thought, I should not follow it. I should instead generate another kind of, of thought. So it's then we gradually have more and more control over the directioning of our body, speech, and mind. But to begin, we have awareness of where we want to go, and the vows help us, and they protect us so much, especially on stormy, dark days, because Yeah, I mean, the those who have more storms and those who have fewer storms, and there are also periods of life where we have more or less. But I think everyone who's here has already gone through a storm or two, right? So what happens is that when there is a storm, we don't see many things, and then unfortunately, when once the storm has passed, the damage has been done, and we need to pay the consequences, and we need to face those consequences, and that's why we really need to protect ourselves, have a safe place, we have deep roots, and where we can stay in while the storm passes. When I was a boy, I went to an astrologist. It was the Professor Zeffirino, who is um, he has an important role in my family. He's already left his body. He was already quite old when I went to see him. I was about 15 years old. And he, without going into all the details, he said, be careful, because in this period you're having a storm is coming, and a storm will be coming. And I said, oh, I said, I didn't give I didn't give any weight to it, and I had forgotten. I had forgotten about it. But exactly as he had foreseen, there was a major storm, and I realized only after. If I had had more awareness, I would have been more prepared, and I would have been able, you know, then I would have had to. Um, um, would have wasted less energy in cleaning up the damage that was done during the storm. But the storm isn't what should give us the direction. It should be the moment where we reinforce our roots, where we put energy in finding our refuge and taking refuge, where we wait for the storm to pass. And this is where our vows and our commitments help us so much. So having this mindful recollection of where we want to go, and this vigilance of what I'm doing, and take advantage of sunny days to reinforce our commitments, to have clarity about our direction, for taking refuge, for always, for constructing a, 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 a more and more safe refuge for us. I think this is clear. I think mindful recollection and vigilance. It's im- it's important for our spiritual path and in life in general. Because I've already seen people who go through a storm and they lose their direction. And when the storm, once the storm has passed, they don't have the energy to 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 pick up the path again. Often for pride. We should always be very clear about our path. So with gratitude and faith and love and our commitments, these should all be cultivated daily, you know, so that they will protect us during our moments of difficulties. And our objective is that gradually there'll be fewer and fewer storms, and that we become less susceptible um, um, to um, um, to the damage of a storm. I mean, this is possible, but we need to keep our direction. Just to conclude what we've said today, I ask you all to remember that all the sacred images that we have, all the words that we recite, the visualizations that we do, all of that, these are tools that we need for our inner development, for our growth, to to develop our qualities. They're tools. They're not an end in and of themselves. And so we need to always be sure that we're using the tools in the right direction, for the right direction.
Losan tempe drume sasum ki drove musel taktu ne gyur chi kewa kuntu yanda lama dang dralme chiki pela long ching sadan lamge yenten rabzo ne dorje change kopang nyur tobe sho nimo dele tsendele nime kuyan dele kshin Ninsen takto delekpe kuncho sumke jingelo kuncho sumke ngodrubotsol kuncho sumke trashisho. All'alba o al tramonto, di notte o durante il giorno, possano i tre gioielli concederci le loro benedizioni, possano aiutarci ad ottenere tutte le realizzazioni e cospargere il sentiero della nostra vita con molti segni di buon auspicio. Buona giornata, grazie a tutti.